Welcome. I'm Kinetic Symphony. I hunt down and report on mysterious and weird, true stories, from glitches to the paranormal. This is my channel's weekly compendium, ending Monday, September 12th, 2022. Case file number 747, written by Triple Dog 5414. Old lady survives collision with semi-truck. The weirdest thing happened to my friend and I in October last year. We discuss it all the time and we still have no explanation for what we saw. It was about 6 p.m. on a Friday night, and my friend and I were walking to a nearby pub to meet the rest of our friends. We stopped at the lights at an intersection with heavy traffic. As we were talking and waiting for the lights to change, a lady approached us from behind and began waiting as well. There was nothing remarkable about her. The only thing of note, really, is that she had a limp. She was about middle-aged, wearing a red blouse, beige skirt, and bright orange scarf. She was holding a bouquet of red flowers and seemed to be coming home from work. She stopped and stood at the lights a couple meters away from us. She stood there for about 5 seconds, just as a large semi-truck was approaching the intersection at about 45 miles an hour. When it was about to reach us, the lady placed her handbag and flowers on the floor and just stepped in front of it without any warning. We saw the truck hit her. We heard the sound of the hood colliding with her body, and then what sounded like crunching and dragging. I swear, I saw her actually beneath the wheels with all her black hair everywhere as she was being tumbled along under it. The truck just sped by, seemingly without noticing that it had hit someone. My friend had his hands over his hair and was repeating, "Oh my God," over and over again, while I felt like I was going to vomit. My friend turned and said something like, "The truck must be dragging her beneath it. It's not even stopping." I thought I was going to black out at this point. My friend pulled out his phone to call the police and an ambulance when suddenly he stopped mid-sentence, his mouth wide open in complete shock. I turned to see what he was looking at, and it was the same woman, identical, right down to the limp, the bright scarf, and the red flowers. No freaking way, I thought. I looked around for the handbag and flowers the woman had put down, but they were nowhere to be found. My friend and I were in absolute shock. I walked up to the lady and asked if she was okay, and she just looked at me funny and said that everything was fine. Then the lights changed and we all crossed the street and parted ways. My friend called the local police station just in case and said that they weren't sure whether we saw a pedestrian get hit by a truck. The police said that they would look into it, and that was that. We didn't hear from them again, so I assumed there was no accident. We still cannot logically explain what we saw. Case notes for file 747. An old lady surviving a collision head-on with a semi-truck. So I have no idea how I would personally react if I witnessed something like this, but I'm just trying to put myself in the story. I think there would be a lot of puking involved, and honestly, I don't think my brain would be able to process what happened. Something that traumatic. I would be in shock first. I wouldn't believe it's happening. It would take a few minutes before your mind could adjust to the horrific reality of what just occurred. Then the woman is already back alive. And it's as if she never stood in front of the truck. Now, I do think there is an explanation. It's just one that's so hard to wrap our heads around. If you've listened to my channel at all, you probably realize that I think that quantum immortality is real. The thing is, quantum immortality is just a pathway, a consequence of transporting one's consciousness between parallel universes. But it only really happens when we die, at least as far as we can tell. However, there are some people, sometimes, in specific locations, and even when people are together, close by, so I think it's more regional than personal. Although there may be some mechanism in the brain that has to be activated for this to be possible. But in short, I think some people are able to peer into these other universes, to look through, sort of like a looking glass. You look into the mirror, but the you looking back isn't quite you. Or in this case, you're not looking at a reflection of yourself, but just a different reality. A universe almost the same as ours. Everything that led up to the woman wearing the same clothes. The only difference is, in that universe, for whatever reason, she was suicidal, and decided that in that moment, It was enough and she was going to end it. And the sad thing is, most of the time, we're only able to travel to or witness parallel universes that are very close to us, and probably that means that they are very, very similar. So, the woman you saw, even though she didn't step in front of the truck, I think there's a high likelihood that she wanted to. She just didn't do it then. I don't know if she's still alive and kicking around, I wonder. I hope she got the help she needed. Hi there. As you may or may not be aware, I've started to narrate fictional horror stories on my Patreon, and also I've started to upload them to YouTube as members-only videos. You can join the channel here if you'd prefer. I'll be uploading one fictional horror story every single week on Sunday. Probably my favorite one so far is about being lost at sea. You want rescue, but be careful. Don't trust the light. Now on to the next story. Case file number 748, written by Skinny Mini 18. The Matrix Hub, Walmart. So I know this is gonna sound weird and ridiculous, but the craziest thing happened at Walmart today that kinda freaked me out for a while. So me and my girlfriend go to Walmart pretty frequently. It's cheap and sometimes they have really cool Disney and anime shirts and stuff that we like, and it's only 5 minutes from our house. She told me she was going to check the women's clothes area to see if they have any biker shorts, while I was going to go to the men's section to see if they had any new anime or Disney shirts. We decided I would just meet back with her since the registers are right in front of the women's clothes, and then we would go. When I was done checking the men's stuff, I saw my girlfriend walking towards the food section, and in my head I was wondering why she was going there. So I started following her to catch up, and I saw her suddenly turn left. I ran and turned left too, and no one was there. It was quite simply an empty aisle. I was kind of confused, so I ran some more looking for her, thinking she was messing with me, and maybe went to the next aisle, and legit, there wasn't anybody near there, and I was confused on where she would have gone. At that point, I decided to just call her up and said, "Hey, where are you? Why did you go to the food aisle? I told you I'd meet back up with you in the women's clothes area." And she said, "I am in the women's clothes? I've been here in the same spot. I just saw you walk here," referring to the section I'm at. She was really confused too. I ran towards the women's section and found her, told her what happened and told her what I saw, and she said maybe I mistook someone else for her, but my girlfriend is pretty distinct. She's 5'9" and has really long blonde hair and is decked out completely in Disney memorabilia. She was definitely weirded out, but kinda just shrugged it off. Honestly, I have no clue what happened. I was only like 7 feet from her when she turned the aisle, and I don't think she would have made it all the way down to the next aisle by the time I turned into it. So no matter who it was, how did they run so fast? And I ran around the entire vicinity looking for her because I thought it was weird. She was legitimately trying on clothes when I met back up with her at the women's section. Who the hell did I see? Or what was it? The fact this happened at Walmart of all places is weird in of itself, but it really did freak me out. I know people are gonna think, oh, you just saw someone who looked like your girlfriend, but she was wearing something very specific. A Disneyland jersey which you only get from the park, with Disney Crocs. We live in a retirement town near a reservation in the valley, so not many 5'9" blonde girls decked out in Disney memorabilia here. Plus, the girl I saw basically disappeared into thin air, so even if it was a girl who just looked like my girlfriend, this still was weird as hell. Case notes for file 748, The Matrix Hub, Walmart. I think we all knew that already. One thing though, we can't deny, Walmart is pretty affordable. I definitely go there sometimes myself too. I mean, you can't beat it. They have great deals, and not the best quality, but you get what you pay for. And yeah, we all know that Walmart is filled with rather unusual people, so that it's a Matrix hub isn't surprising. And you are right that it's very, very rare. A woman in the US that's 5'9", just in that of itself is 10% of women. So that'd be 5% of the population. Then you add into the fact that she's blonde, she's wearing this very hyper-specific Disney memorabilia, and the odds collapse to 1 in a million, if not greater odds. And then the really weird part is the fact that she just vanished, whoever this was. It was almost like the past story where you were seeing a different universe, and nothing was really different, and this would explain why she wasn't there when you went to check. She just was in a different universe. And for whatever reason, you were able to see that universe temporarily. Maybe we see into these alternate universes frequently. We just don't notice because most of the time, it's exactly the same as ours. Or the differences are so minor that we can't even process them. That would make sense. There's some overlap, bleed through. At least for the universes that are very near to us. Case file number 749, written by Glodden, when the sun suddenly says goodnight. So, I probably wouldn't have thought this was weird, except for I wasn't the only person who saw it. Back in high school, I used to walk home with my, at the time, best friend. I lived at the top of a huge hill. Before I left my friend to walk the rest of the way home, we would usually stand at the bottom of the hill just to finish our conversation. I'm talking to my friend when everything is just suddenly dark. For a good couple of seconds, I couldn't see anything, but my eyes were still open and I could still feel my feet on the ground. I could even still feel the presence of my friend in front of me, but we both had fallen silent and I couldn't hear any sound, no birds, no nothing. Then suddenly, like someone had flicked a switch, the lights were back and everything was normal. My friend and I were staring silently at one another. I was ready to shrug it off and assume my eyes were playing tricks on me until my friend pipes up. Did it just get really dark all of a sudden? We then both freaked out as we confirmed that we both experienced total darkness. It couldn't have been a cloud covering the sun because the dark was instant and total. It was exactly like a light switch had been flipped off and on. Anyway, time has passed and I don't think about it too much, but it's definitely one of my more strange memories. Case notes for file 749, when the sun suddenly says goodnight. So these kind of glitches where the sun suddenly stops shining seem to be very common when in groups of people, which tells me that it's localized to a specific area, although it's not quite as large as an entire town or anything like that. More of an area the size of maybe a large store. And I don't think it has anything to do with the sun itself. I don't think somehow it's just not producing light for a split second or a couple seconds in this case. Now I think it's down to our perception of it. For some reason, there's something that is interfering with our brain's ability to either process or receive stimuli. So people often mention not being able to hear. They can still feel you felt the presence of your friend. So the sensory input from sound, pressure waves in the air doesn't translate. So there's some kind of block going on. Maybe it's even some sort of weapon test. Maybe a drone is hovering high above and somehow inducing this lack of sight and sound. I wouldn't be that surprised if this was some sort of government conspiracy or they're testing a non-lethal weapon. If you think about it, it's not that far-fetched. They have flashbangs already, stun guns, and etc. If there's some sort of weapon that is invisible, can be used from a long range, and leave someone without permanent damage, unable to see or hear, yeah, that wouldn't be that surprising. Bonus file, written by Cosmic Ray 25, when the dead become arsonists. I live right beside a funeral home, owned by an old man. I've lived here for a couple of years right in the center of town, and never had any issues. Until a few months ago, when strange things started to occur. Behind the funeral home is a small parking lot that stays empty, except for the hearse. There's a small hill and a tree line. I've never seen the old man who lives and owns the funeral home. I only hear him play the piano around 9 p.m. once a week. One night, at around 2 to 3 a.m., I was outside smoking and I saw this huge, shadow-like figure, about 10 to 15 feet tall by the trees. I started recording on my phone. I've seen that tree line thousands of times because it's right in my point of view from where I sit. I've never seen anything so bizarre, until a few weeks after that. I was upstairs fixing my curtain in the window, just shy of midnight, I'd say, when I spot a man's face looking up at me. This was behind my house, and the man who lives behind me was in his apartment watching TV. He sits next to his window. I could only see what looked like an unfamiliar man's face, which was lit up in a bluish-gray tint. He was just looking straight up at me. He had a pale face and dark eyes, and I can only describe his facial expression as dark and chilling. I could just feel in my gut that something wasn't right. I had an overwhelming sense of dread, so I took my phone and started to record him from below. When I was recording, I noticed my phone was picking up multiple faces in the dark. I think I counted 4 to 5 pale, translucent, ghostly faces surrounding the first one in some of the video. Now I know it could just be face pareidolia. I'd try to see myself as a logical person, but this was so ominous, I was very frightened. Other strange noises like tapping and scratching on the walls, hearing clicking noises. At 2 a.m. the same night, a building at the end of my street caught on fire. I couldn't sleep, for obvious reasons, and saw my window just explode with orange light. So right at this moment, while crapping my pants of course, I slowly get up to look. The entire building was engulfed with flames. Luckily, the building was empty. Thankfully, I made it through the night without having a complete nervous breakdown. 2 days later, word gets out. The old man who runs a nursing home has been caught stacking up bodies on top of each other in the basement for the second time. His reasoning for not properly handling them was he was retired. I heard he had an assistant, but they were on vacation. At one point, there were 12 bodies stacked and one in major decomposition. It's the second time in a year his license was suspended. He also got in trouble for swapping the cremated remains of at least 2 of his clients. He had a bunch of conditions when his license was reinstated the first time, but clearly he didn't follow them. But even just hearing him play the piano gives me the heebie-jeebies. Case notes for the bonus file: when the dead become arsonists. Fire to us represents intensity, and in this case, power and even rage. The spirits or echoes that you saw were infuriated by the fact that they were not being taken care of, at least their physical bodies as they passed away, were being mistreated by this old man who was literally stacking them up and leaving them to decompose. How cruel. Early on you mentioned seeing a giant shadow figure though. That's interesting. Normally shadow figures are reported to be rather small. I don't think this was an actual shadow figure, but just some sort of artifact from a lot of echoes being around. It would actually be interesting if all reports of spontaneous combustion are caused by the manifestation of extreme will and hatred from spirits or echoes that are lingering behind. And I think that hatred could be fueled in part because if you're bound to this planet, still following with gravity and everything, it makes sense that if you are still connected, you'd be connected to some piece that's still on the planet. And what else could connect even stronger than your own physical body still around? It makes sense to be cremated, just in case. Because I wouldn't want to be lingering around forever because my body is not burned. Or maybe it depends on decomposition too. Do you have to salt and burn bones to free a spirit? Bonus file. Written by Naosa Lamela, The Hotel Entity. My family and I were recently on a trip in Glasgow. We stayed in this fantastic hotel that had previously been around a while. Lots of plaques and photos of famous people who had stayed prior. The first night, I woke up, though not abruptly really, to what I can only describe as a presence. I heard distinctly, and by that I mean somehow the words entered my brain, but it wasn't quite a voice per se. Someone said, "I'm watching you." But it wasn't scary at all somehow. It was absolutely a matter of fact. I don't have any other experiences like this, and I've always thought of myself as a big scaredy cat, so I have no idea how I fell back to sleep. Not only that, I woke up the next day feeling great and didn't even remember to tell anyone. The morning following the next night, my mom, who was sharing the room with me, says at breakfast, "You all aren't going to believe me, but I swear someone was in our room last night." I remember thinking, just be still and let them finish whatever they're doing. Needless to say, this jogged my memory and I relayed my experience. The fact that we had 2 independent experiences in the same room kinda confirms for me that something is in that hotel. I asked the staff right before we left and they kinda smiled and said, "Not sure, but you're not the first to mention this." Bonus file for the hotel entity. This reminds me of a story I narrated pretty recently about someone that had an encounter with aliens in the desert at night. The way they described it was, the aliens were able to communicate directly into their mind. As in, not speaking verbally, but the thoughts just appeared in their mind. And they weren't scared either. And that's a tremendously important detail to mention here. In both cases, they weren't scared. Now maybe there's some sort of suppression mechanism for the instincts we have, fight or flight. Maybe that's necessary to communicate with us, because if not, we'd be terrified. Or maybe they really just don't mean us any harm. And I would kind of fall into the latter camp of that assumption, because if they meant us harm, we wouldn't even know we're under attack. There's so many ways to kill the human race if you have the technology needed to travel between solar systems or galaxies. Just having a ship that can go that quick, you could literally just ram it into the planet, and the energy in that is more than nuclear weapons, just a kinetic energy. Not to mention any other thing they could target, create a genetic disorder or infertility or disease, anything. There's so many options when you have the ability to literally go beyond the planet and manipulate space around it. They could divert an asteroid to come crashing onto the planet, like in Stargate, where Anubis was diverting a Naquadah-enhanced asteroid. And we don't have any warp drive to send the asteroid through the planet on the other side. No, we'd have to depend on the Armageddon crew, and I don't think that would work quite as well as it does in the movies. Case file number 750, written by Chorp Chomp, Trading Places. I was hanging out with my family for the weekend, so we were all staying together. I took my dog for a walk and then came up the stairs to get ready and go to bed. We share a full and a half bathroom upstairs. As I go up, I see my mom brushing her teeth in the half bath. I then say hi to her, and she waves because the toothbrush is in her mouth. I walk by the full bath on my way to my room, but the door is closed and the shower is on, so I figure my dad is taking a shower and I'll just wait until he's done to get ready for bed. He's taking forever, so I go to my mom's room to hang out and complain, but my mom isn't there. My dad is. I asked if mom jumped in after him, and he looked confused and said she's been in there the whole time. I said, but I waved to her coming up the stairs. And he said, no, you waved to me. You guys, I wasn't intoxicated or that tired, and my parents look very different. I even vividly remember my mom's hair being pulled back in her pajamas. What just happened? Case notes for file 750. Trading Places. Our brains are capable of much trickery. We have underpinning algorithms running in our subconscious that we can't even hope to understand. And they're constantly filtering out reality, because there's so much stimulus coming in, from sound to sensation of touch or sight. If our brain didn't filter it to some extent and take shortcuts, we would go mad. So it is possible that you somehow just saw the periphery of what you thought was your mom, but it really was your dad. It does seem less likely the more you think about it, because you specifically remember pajamas, that she had a toothbrush in her mouth. It's hard to mistake your mom for your dad, no doubt. And weirdly enough, if it wasn't some sort of artifact from the fact that our brain is constantly filtering out information, processes that don't exactly make sense to us, if it wasn't something of that nature, then the only thing I can think of is that you somehow died in the few moments between walking up the stairs and going to the bathroom upstairs and having seen your mom below. And in the new universe, your mom was already in the shower up there. Or your mom can just teleport somehow. Maybe she's a superhero. That'd be kinda cool, but I don't think it's very likely. Case file number 751, written by Arubles, a horrific disturbance in the YouTube algorithm. This happened last night while I was watching a bunch of old Zero Punctuation, a funny video game reviewer on YouTube, before bed. I had been watching nothing but Zero Punctuation for a while, and autoplay kicked in, playing more Zero Punctuation. I was a couple episodes deep, and then autoplay started playing a compilation video of every Zero Punctuation video from 2008 at around 10 p.m. This was an almost 3-hour-long video. I started to doze off about an hour later, around 11 p.m. I fell into a pretty light sleep for maybe an hour and a half. Around 1:45, I started to wake up because I could hear a really shrill, ringing noise cutting in and out of what sounded like TV static. When I opened my eyes, there was a video playing on my laptop, and it jolted me awake. along with the really awful high-pitched ringing and static noise. The video was showing distorted black figures moving around a bright white background. I vividly remember a distorted-looking face circling around a sort of square box thing. It was kind of glitching and making erratic jumps as it moved, and every time a glitch or jump happened, it would make a noise like a record skipping or scratching. It kind of reminded me of those analog horror stories that are popular on YouTube right now. It scared me to death, and I remember instinctively moving my hand in front of the screen like when a jump scare happens in a horror movie. I reached out with my other hand and hit the keyboard, and like that, another zero punctuation video started to play. My heart was pounding, and I got up, got some water, walked outside and calmed down. Went back into my bedroom, zero punctuation was still playing, and after another hour of watching that, I fell back to sleep. I've been thinking about it all day, and I've been trying to rationalize what I saw. First, I thought maybe an analog horror video did start playing somehow. I don't watch them very often, but I have in the past, so maybe one started playing in my autoplay recommended videos. But when I checked my browser history, no such video was played between the two zero punctuation videos. In fact, nothing at all played in between the videos according to my browser history. Second, I thought maybe the end of the last zero punctuation video was just weird and had a scary homage to all the horror video games he likes to play. Again, no dice. It was a review of an older Prince of Persia game, and then it ended. Finally, I thought maybe I had been dreaming. This still seems sort of plausible, and I know this is what everyone says who's maybe dreamed up something paranormal and mistakes it for reality, but it seems so goddamn real. Like, I distinctly remember every moment from hearing the noise to opening my eyes to shielding my eyes with my hand, and then to finally hitting the keyboard. I've also never had a history of sleep paralysis or being unable to distinguish dreams from reality. Who knows though, maybe after hitting the ripe old age of 31, my mind is starting to falter. I also want to add real quick that when I looked at my browser history, I checked the length of the video I was watching against when the next video started playing, the zero punctuation video that started right after that creepy video, to see if there was any unaccounted time missing. The compilation video I fell asleep to started at 9:57 p.m. The video's length was 2 hours, 51 minutes, and 16 seconds. That would put the time it ended at a little over 12:48 a.m. Browser history says the next video started playing at 12:49 p.m. That leaves 1 minute unaccounted for. Now, my browser history, Google Chrome, rounds to the nearest minute, so this could easily be explained by rounding errors. If anyone knows how to expand your browser history to show seconds, that would be rad. If anyone has ever experienced anything similar to this, I'd love to know. Or if anyone has a better explanation for what could have happened, I'd be equally interested. I'm usually a huge skeptic when it comes to this kind of stuff, but this is the first time in my life that I'm really at a loss to account for what happened. Case notes for file 751. A horrific disturbance in the YouTube algorithm. Well, being a YouTuber, this one hits close to home. And oddly, this is rather terrifying indeed to me. I actively avoid watching videos that are meant to be actually horrific in the sense of programming your mind through sound and visuals. Some videos where it's mentioned that just watching it can make you feel uneasy. Think about it, the mind is a computer, and a quantum computer of almost infinite complexity, but still just a computer. So if you're taking in inputs that are arranged in such a way as to program the mind to feel fear, I don't want that. Something about it unsettles me. So the idea that a video would be playing that would do this without your permission is deeply unsettling. Keep in mind that smell and vision and sound are intimately connected, hardwired into the primitive brain. They're pathways, you could say, to accessing our subconscious. Now, the only mundane possibility I could explain with this is it was some sort of ad. Now, I don't know if you have YouTube Premium, maybe you do, maybe there weren't any ads on the video, and in that case it wouldn't be this. Also, it's not entirely clear this is possible. Quite a while ago, maybe over 2 years now, I did try to advertise one of my videos on YouTube AdSense, but some of them weren't even accepted. They're very strict, or at least they were back then, on what videos they'll allow to be promoted. So it seems like a pure horror video meant to instill fear isn't going to be accepted. But outside of that, I don't know. Some sort of connection glitch, somehow you played into someone else's video? That would explain how it didn't register in your watch history, because somehow your phone was intercepting someone else's video signal? It seems extremely unlikely though, it just shouldn't happen. Bonus file, written by Angelus, 726-726. The Impossible Message of Love. This happened in January of 2019. My stepdad had been in our family's life for 30 years before he was diagnosed with cancer. He never had any biological children, but he had me and my sister, and we couldn't have asked for a better stepdad or granddad for our children. I was with him when he was diagnosed and with him for all of his treatments. From the very beginning, there was no question of who would take care of him. It was going to be me. He and my mother were split up at the time, and it just seemed natural that I would be the one to do it because of how close we were. And honestly, I considered it an honor. Unfortunately, his prognosis was not very good, and they gave him less than a year to live. He barely made it 6 months after his diagnosis. He was in the hospital the last 6 days of his life. He had a DNR, do not resuscitate, and as hard as it was, I didn't argue with him about it. 2 days before he passed, he was in and out of consciousness and was barely able to talk. Last night, he was able to communicate that he really wanted me to go home and check on the dogs. This was just after 3 in the morning. I told him I would do that and then I would be right back. He gave a small smile and nodded. It took 20 minutes for me to get home and 10 minutes after walking through the door to the hospital calling and saying he had passed. I felt so guilty for leaving him until I thought, he knew there was already someone with the dogs, but he insisted that I check on them anyways. Perhaps he didn't want me there at the time of his passing. I don't know. I still don't know. Now, what I do know is the morning after he passed, I had a missed call from his phone that had been in my purse the whole time he was in the hospital. The call was made at 3:47 a.m., and the voicemail that was left said, "Thank you for everything, sweetheart. I love you." That message was left in my stepdad's perfect, loving voice, not the raspy, out-of-breath, strained voice he had moments before he died. Some people have said that it may have been an old message that I just received that morning, but either way, I thought it was amazing. Case notes for the bonus file, The Message of Impossible Love. I am so sorry for your loss. I actually had to wait a couple minutes just to record these thoughts because I started to tear up a bit at the end there. I've never lost anyone truly close to me. Not yet. I mean, I've lost pets, which, just that hurts enough. But this I couldn't imagine, especially that you cared for your stepdad for months before he passed away. What is more brutal than that? To get a diagnosis that's just incurable and just have to wait and suffer along the way. It's not right. One thing that I do hope we do as humanity is manage to solve disease and end death. Death is this truly abominable curse that's afflicted on all of us as soon as we're born. And of course, I know quantum immortality comes into play, but the thing with quantum immortality is, I think it only works if there's other copies of you in other universes. So if all copies are dead, I don't know what happens then. Maybe there is an afterlife, maybe it's a simulation and finally it's game over and you start anew. Because of that uncertainty, I'd rather just stick around here, so I hope we do, through science, develop some method of curing death. There is some progress being made in that front. There's this research group called SENS. It stands for senescence and other things that I don't remember by heart. But they're actively trying to cure death, sort of to say. Not by stopping the aging process, which is unimaginably complex, but by repairing the damage that's caused by aging, or that we attribute to aging, before it accumulates to such an extent that diseases and death would ensue. So yeah, I'm hopeful on that. It's still decades away, maybe centuries, I don't know. But hopefully they'll manage it before I meet the Grim Reaper. Or any of us. Now, as far as this story goes, I think it's entirely possible that if your dad did pass away, there is some mechanism for ghosts or echoes to manipulate the EM spectrum, to make lights flicker, to make electronics go crazy. The signals we get through Wi-Fi or through cell towers coming to your phone, it's just various forms of EM spectrum energy. So if a spirit is able to manipulate those signals in order to direct a message to your phone, it's not inconceivable. Now, to do that would be very complicated in the realm of the mundane. Maybe somehow it's very simple to do when you're a spirit. Case file number 752, written by Psychological Box 577. Ice cold water from the ether. About a year ago in late June, I was over at my mentor's house. I do wildlife rehabilitation, mostly squirrels, coons, and possum. I was in the living room holding 2 baby raccoons, one in each arm, and Mrs. Gina, my mentor, was in the kitchen. All of a sudden, ice-cold water started pouring on my forehead. I started calling for Gina because I was completely dumbfounded and in complete shock. She poked her head around the corner and said she saw a stream of water coming from thin air and only about 2 inches above my forehead. It was about a cup of ice-cold water. Of course, we did the usual investigation. There was no condensation or evidence of any water on the ceiling. She had been in that house for over 20 years and never had a leak in the ceiling. I even tasted it. Nothing salty, just regular water. But since then is what really shocked me. I got off of pain medication after being on it for many years following 5 separate spine surgeries. I became a counselor. I left an abusive 13-year-old relationship and found the love of my life. Bought a house and moved to the country. My life completely changed for the better. The turning point was the water. I believe that it was spirit water, holy water. Usually you are anointed on your forehead in religious ceremonies. People have long used ice-cold water as a means to wake someone up. I feel that it opened my third eye and was a literal blessing of sorts from the other side. This is my first time talking publicly about it. I'm interested to see what other conclusions people will come to. I think things like this are very fascinating. Ice-cold water from the ether. This is a cool and small one. It's actually kind of baffling. I mean, you said you checked for leaks, so it can't be a leak from the ceiling. If there was a leak, there'd be evidence of it. It's not like water could leak from the ceiling and then there'd just be nothing, no evidence at all. There'd be some kind of hole. The water weighs a lot, so if it actually breached the ceiling, you would see a giant hole, or at least a small one. And your mentor Gina said that she saw it. She saw water appear right above your forehead. I mean, you have an eyewitness right there. Unless it's some sort of elaborate prank, but how would you make water appear in front of someone's forehead? You'd have to get Chris Angel or Penn and Teller involved for this one. Also, this reminds me of a story I read a long time ago, where someone was sleeping and they woke up and next to their bed was a giant puddle of water, but there was seemingly no source for it. No leaks of any kind, not from below, not from above. It just was a giant puddle of water. No one broke in. There was no one around. He lived alone. He didn't have pets. There was absolutely no logical way there could be water there, but there was. What's up with water? Creepy file number 47, written by Dig Tac Bro, stalked by a creature of pure dread. I work for my city's water department. My everyday job consists of repairing leaks or doing new installations for businesses and homes. There are 2 parts to our water department that keep everything running: distribution, where I normally work, and production. Production deals with the chemical side of things. They chlorinate the water and do water sample checks. Production is also responsible for the upkeep of our water well sites and our water storage facilities, like the tall water towers you might have in your city. Mowing grass is one of those responsibilities. Both parts of our department are extremely understaffed right now, so we sometimes give the production guys a hand with the grass when they need it. A couple of weeks ago it was my turn, and here's where the weirdness begins. My city is in central Louisiana with a population of about 45,000 people. We're surrounded by a wooded area. No matter which way you travel into or out of town, you're going to see plenty of trees. As such, a lot of our well sites are located out in the boonies. Most of our city trucks are 4-wheel drive with mud grips because it's needed more often than not. I had 4 sites to cut that day. I headed out just before sunrise to the one at the end of a long dirt road, where if trouble strikes, your phone better be charged because no one is going to be able to hear you yell for help. Surprisingly, this isn't where my strange encounter took place. The sun was rising as I was approaching my first sight, and on the road ahead of me stepped out a doe with her 2 fawns. Excitedly, I hurried to snap some pictures. To my surprise, the mama and her babies were not afraid of the loud rumbling diesel I was driving. The speckled fawns made their way across the path as the mom calmly watched me in the truck. Once the babies were safely across, she looked back the way she came and then joined the little ones in the tree line on the opposite side of the road. I breezed through my mowing, loaded the equipment back into the trailer, and texted my mom pictures of the deer as I headed back into town. My mom messaged me back saying, "I've read that deer are an omen of good fortune. Looks like you're going to have a great day. Be safe. I love you." And I did have a great day. I knocked out the next 2 sites without issue and everything was going smooth. That is, until I reached the gate of the last place I had to mow. McKeithen's site is the biggest one we have that's closer to town. It's about the size of a football field. It's not in the middle of nowhere, but it is on the outskirts of the city. There's normally plenty of traffic that travels the road there, so there's really no feeling of seclusion, even though it's surrounded by thick woods on 3 sides. I've cut the spot plenty of times, but that day felt different. I pulled the truck through and hopped out to lock the gate behind me. Immediately, I felt like I needed to get back into the truck as quickly as possible. I made my way down the driveway to park near the tower, like I have many times before. But after I parked and killed the truck, everything felt heavy and silent. I don't know how long I sat until I was able to open the door and get out. Instantly, I felt eyes on me. The feeling was coming from the back right corner of the field outside the fence, just in the tree line where the palmetto bushes grow. I calmed my nerves and reminded myself that I was surrounded by an 8-foot unclimbable fence with the gate locked. Yeah, if someone had a gun, then they could have shot me if they wanted to, but they weren't going to actually get to me. If the barbed wire at the top of the fence didn't get them, a face full of weed-eater string and blades would. I jumped on the 0 turn and took off mowing, keeping an eye on the back corner during every pass. After about 2 hours, it took multiple runs due to the overgrowth. I had the entire front mowed and it was time to hit the back by the creepy corner. I was about to head that way, but the mower blades wouldn't engage. I had to take covers off, pull grass out of the belts and out from under the deck. I had to grease the pulleys and do all sorts of troubleshooting. I finally got the blades going, but then the gas light came on. I didn't realize it until later, but it felt like something was doing everything it could to keep me from going to that part of the lot. I finally got everything up and running and mowed the back as quickly as possible, doing everything I could to keep my sight on the fence. I finally got done and loaded the mower. I still had to do a little bit of weed eating around that area, but when the weed eater wouldn't start, I knew it was time to go. I hadn't had issue with it all day, but that was the last hint that I needed to get out of there. After pulling out of the gate and locking it behind me, I turned out onto the highway to head home, but not before looking at the back corner one last time. That's when I finally saw it, the unmistakable shadow of a figure standing in the palmettos. It wasn't trying to hide or make itself unseen. It was there. Being at a safe distance from it, I stopped and watched. It moved to the side as if it were bending to try to see me better at the road. It had no distinguishing features, no hair, no clothes, just a person-shaped mass. I decided I had to get as far away from there as I could immediately. The thought that I had been so close to it for so long and never saw it sent chills to my core. I called my mom later that night and told her what had happened. She told me she did some more reading about seeing the deer and learned that they are a sign of protection, that some people believe that a deer means that a higher power is watching over you. After my mom told me that, I couldn't help but think, what if I had not seen the deer that morning? Would I have seen the shadow? Would it have been able to do something to me? Why did it choose to show itself to me? Is it something about me, or is it tied to that part of the woods? My mom texted me even later that night. She was sitting out on our back steps in my old little hometown when she heard some rustling near her storage shed. She shined her light into the dark, and what stands there but a deer? Deer had never come into the backyard before, but that night a large deer stood tall, staring back at my mom. She told me she felt like it was there as if to say, "It's okay. He's safe. Don't worry. We got him." Case notes for the creepy file number 47. Stalked by a creature of pure dread. So I don't typically put stock in fortune cookies or omens or anything like that. But I will say, every time I've encountered a deer, which is actually a few times in my life, I did have a good day after that. So it could just be coincidence, who knows? Maybe people have a good day because to see a deer, you typically are in a more rural, country environment that's more laid back. Maybe something like that. I also think it's another reflection on how powerful our subconscious is. You knew almost instantaneously as soon as you arrived on site that there was something there that wasn't meant to do you any good. How did you know? Your subconscious picking up on slight cues, maybe a slight ripple in the shadow of the forest, that your conscious mind wasn't being fed that information, but your subconscious knew. Towards the end though, why did it reveal itself? It didn't attack you when it had the opportunity to, after you were finished and exited the enclosure. So it doesn't seem like it was necessarily aggressive. Maybe indeed the omen you got from seeing the deer protected you. Or maybe it just wasn't aggressive, maybe territorial, and just didn't like other people being there. But sometimes it does feel like there's some sort of battle between good and evil going on, especially the last decade. I don't know if anyone else is getting that sense. And there's more entities and creatures and weird things going on, or at least more people are reporting them. Maybe it's just the reporting bias and fallacy, because more people are reporting things now that the internet is available.